So finally, we have Rosalind Franklin, and her champion is the Vice Provost and Chief Academic Officer and Professor of Molecular Diagnostics, amongst other things, Orla Shiels. And Vera isn't with us. We have a film. I should say that we have taken film of in all the artist studios as they were working. And so we're going to share the short film of Vera to finish off with. But Orla, so I know that, well, I won't give away the punchline. Orla, talk to us about you and Rosalind Franklin, please.
So I'll begin maybe by saying, first of all, thank you. So first of all, for the wonderful evening we had last night. It was this heady mix of sensitive and seismic in equal measure, and it was just such a privilege to be there. And the next thing I would say is that I feel hugely uncomfortable being a champion for Rosalind Franklin. I would concede I'm definitely a fan of the woman, but I mean, she was so remarkable. She just stood for such integrity, and she had this just desire to capture purity of science and, you know, the rigor of good scientific endeavour, and that in itself is a role model. I came across her first as a primary school student, and we had to do a poster on somebody. And I happened across her by accident more than design, and I was just fascinated by the descriptions of her, the fact that she was always seen as a talented outsider. She never really fit in, and yet she forged her niche. And she, from an early age, knew she wanted to be a scientist. This is the only similarity. I knew I wanted to be a scientist. And so it was wonderful to be able to follow what she did and look in amazement, and to be very fortunate to end up working on the same molecules as she discovered and had the first sort of true understanding of. So she, as a young girl, was very, very talented. She was a prodigious student, really. She studied at Cambridge. She studied physics and chemistry, and then she worked in the Coal Board Research Association. So she worked on graphite and coal molecules, and she got her PhD from Cambridge doing that. And then she went to Paris for a couple of years, and that's where she discovered X-ray crystallography, and she honed her skills and brought them back to King's College London, and that's where she did that famous work. And there's a sentence in the Nature publication from April 1953, which is possibly one of the greatest scientific understatements you could imagine. And it says, "This structure has novel features which may have considerable biological interest." Now, it's important to say that was written by James Watson and Crick, and that was their seminal paper. In that same edition was Rosalind Franklin's description of photograph 51, this beautiful, beautiful X-ray crystallography photograph, which was generated through exposure of the DNA that she had extracted to X-ray beam bombardment for 100 hours. And it's important to mention that because it speaks to why she died so young. In doing her research, she was exposed to those ionizing radiation, and so her very, very early demise is absolutely intricately woven with that work that she did. But it's interesting that her paper is in that same edition, and that was done by the editors, on purpose, because her work corroborated that sentence. And what she didn't know, and what I suppose none of us maybe know for certain, but many speculate, was that the fact that Watson and Crick had perhaps access to her unpublished photographs was what allowed them to hypothesize their theory. And then the role her paper in that same edition served was to corroborate and to give validity to their hypothesis. So it's challenging to talk about that and to see how the work she did wasn't given its true merit at the time. And sadly, I mean, obviously Watson, Crick and Maurice Wilkins from King's they received the Nobel Prize for that work. She was dead by the time that award was given out in the early 60s. So it's very poignant for me to be here talking about her. But I went on then, I studied biomedical science. My two favourite molecules are DNA and RNA. And RNA is what Rosalind Franklin went on to work on. And the work that she did in RNA is some of the seminal work, the fundamental work on the structural biology of viruses. And that's the work that enabled the vaccines that we all benefited from in the last year or so. So her work has this ongoing, perpetuating legacy, whether it's in the DNA sector or in functional genomics using RNA. So she's a phenomenally powerful woman. And some years back, and this is, I think, the punchline Helen was referring to, I had one of those vagaries, and I decided I would, probably because of the area in science I was working in, I decided to go back and look at medical law and biomedical ethics, and I studied that in King's in London. And going into the law school at the time was in Somerset House, for anybody who knows it, lovely part of London. And as you go through the arch, Catherine Newell, the court hall is just to the right, you go through the arch, and straight in front of you is this building with a plaque on it. It says, this is the building in which the X-ray crystallography work that, discovered the structure of DNA was done on the bottom by Rosalind Franklin. And it was just so moving as a scientist, there for a different reason, but to be drawn back yet again to this fundamental truism of the work that she had done. And that's what really inspires me about her. So, and also just this, as I've said, her integrity in science, her dependence only on data. She wouldn't speculate. She had to have data to underpin her findings. And the other thing that she always aspired for was knowledge that would better the lot of mankind. So not just knowledge for knowledge's sake, but something that would change us for the good. So if that weren't enough, I think that's possibly where I'll stop. But I'm a huge fan.
Orla, you really brought her alive for us there. I think we'll go straight on to Vera's the film.
That's Rosalind Franklin, or at least my version of her. That's the finished bust and all three pieces. So it's all separate: the socle, the torso, and the head. One of my worries was that I didn't want her make her look like a porcelain doll. I didn't want her to be perfect and just kind of soft focus washed over, so I wanted her to look more real. So I wanted the texture here to be quite real, but also the skin, if you look at it closely, it's not completely smooth. She has loads of pores, and that was really important for me, because if you have a pretty lady, it kind of becomes decorative real quickly. The bottom is just a straightforward marble socle. I came up with my own design, sort of based slightly on the idea of the double helix of DNA. So it's just 10 rotated discs, but I think the kind of the way it swirls around made me think of that double helix, a geometric pattern, which is what she would have dealt with in her work a lot. The torso is made from jesmonite. I made the torso in clay and I dressed it up with fabric. So I had to make her top out of fabric, which was a bit challenging, as I don't have that much experience with it. With the fabric, I wanted to go into a pattern. Is a reference to that kind of, the pattern, but also the double helix structure of DNA is kind of, captured in that a little bit. I tried a lot of different fabrics. I I did want to capture her style. Every person has their own sense in fashion and the way they dress, and so I did want to capture that in some way. She has that necklace in quite a lot of the pictures. Looking at the photos, I was astonished how friendly and relaxed she was looking, because from doing research on her, it wasn't easy for her, and I know she had a lot of conflict with colleagues, and her work was then used in the discovery of the structure of DNA, and she wasn't really credited for it. She doesn't look bitter. She kind of looks at ease with herself. I probably went for an early 30s version of her because she was quite a good-looking woman, and why not reflect that in the bust? I like to think that as a woman I bring maybe a different sensitivity to it. I wanted her to stand out a bit, to make her individual, and well, I hope she can hold her place.
So, ladies and gentlemen, bang on 1 o'clock, we can get the VP up to the hospital. Thank you all so much for coming. I just want to give my absolute heartfelt thanks to our artists and to our scholarly champions. You have absolutely brought these 4 phenomenal women to life with a depth. I've learnt so much, and I just want to thank you all so much for your contribution, and particularly to our artists. Thank you so much.